A great place to start is with a definition of what planning actually is. For our purposes, let's say that planning is predetermining a course of events in writing. So, thinking through the day while you're in the shower doesn't count. You need to write it down. Notice also that word predetermining. This is not a synonym for guaranteeing. Your day, week, and life may not go exactly according to your written plan. But with a plan as your roadmap, you're guaranteed to more quickly recover from unexpected detours, and you're far more likely than the person without a plan to arrive at your final destination. Sadly, though, most people don't plan daily. The University of Chicago conducted a study in which they polled 4,000 working executives, asking them if they predetermined each day's course of events in writing. Just 3% said they did. As for the other 97%, well, you can conduct your own poll. You'll likely hear the same responses. The top 3 reasons for not planning were: 1. Planning limits my freedom. 2. I'm too busy firefighting. And 3, my favorite, I don't have time. Let's consider that last and most popular excuse for just a moment. Think of the most successful person you know. How many hours does he or she have in a day? 24. How about someone who's really struggling? How many hours does that person have? 24 again. And everyone in between? 24. You get the idea. You see, it's not the amount of time we have that determines our success. That's fixed. Rather, it's how we choose to use that time. Every day we're faced with a variety of situations in which we're required to make choices about how we use our time. For years, we at Franklin Covey have been using a tool called the time matrix. It's a square divided into 4 sections or quadrants that represents how we choose to spend our time. Quadrant 1 is called the quadrant of necessity and involves things that are both urgent and important. Quadrant 2 is called the quadrant of leadership. It involves things that are important but not urgent. Quadrant 3 involves things that are urgent but not important. It's called the quadrant of deception. And Quadrant 4, the quadrant of default or waste, involves things that are neither urgent nor important. Let me give you some examples. Quadrant 1 activities are important things that have to be done right now. They could be anything from handling a crisis to meeting a critical deadline to getting to an important appointment on time. Quadrant 2 activities are all the important things you tend to push off, simply because they never become urgent. Planning, preparation, prevention, education, exercise, and career development are all Quadrant 2 activities. Quadrant 3 activities are things that seem like they have to be done right now, but really aren't important. Common Quadrant 3 activities include listening to the latest office gossip, attending unnecessary meetings, ever do that, and trying to satisfy other people's urgent issues. Finally, Quadrant 4 activities are things that have no urgency, nor do they even have to be done. Lying on the couch watching a TV show you're not interested in, or surfing the web while you procrastinate a report that's due are both good examples. So, where do you think you choose to spend more of your time? On urgent things or on important things? Ideally, we should spend all of our time in Quadrants 1 and 2 on things that are important and urgent, or important but not urgent. Notice the constant? Important. Of these 2 quadrants, we should work towards spending most of our time in Quadrant 2 on things that are important but not urgent. The wonderful effect of spending time in Quadrant 2 is that you'll have fewer Quadrant 1 activities. Also, if you invest more time in Quadrant 2, you'll be less susceptible to spending time on things that aren't important, Quadrants 3 and 4, because you'll better recognize the things that matter most. The key is to understand the difference between urgent and important. In simple terms, urgent means now, and important means worth doing. The problem for many of us is we unwittingly join the 2 terms at the hip. Case in point, someone asks you to do a report and tells you it's urgent. Have you ever thought to yourself, ooh, urgent, this must be important? Or how about the opposite? Someone asks you to do something very important and you think, ooh, important, I'd better do this right away. While the association between urgent and important is sometimes valid, it isn't always the case. Let's wrap up this section with some questions and answers from the book First Things First.
Among all the urgent and important things that face us, how do we know what to do?
This is the dilemma that fills our lives. It's what leads us to feel we need to hunker down and do more, faster. But almost always there is one thing among all the others that should be done first. In a sense, there is a quadrant 1 of quadrant 1, or a quadrant 2 of quadrant 2.
Is it bad to be in quadrant 1?
No, it's not. In fact, many people will spend a significant amount of their time in quadrant 1. The key issue is why you're there. Are you in quadrant 1 based on urgency or importance? If urgency dominates when importance faces you, you'll slip into quadrant 3. It's the urgency addiction. But if you're in quadrant 1 because of importance, when urgency faces you, you'll move to quadrant 2. Both quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 describe what's important. It's only the time factor that changes. The real problem is when you're spending time in quadrants 3 and 4.
Where am I going to get the time to spend in quadrant 2?
If you're looking for time to spend in quadrant 2, quadrant 3 is the primary place to get it. Time spent in quadrant 1 is both urgent and important. We already know we need to be there, and we know we shouldn't be in quadrant 4. But quadrant 3 can fool us. The key is learning to see all of our activities in terms of their importance. Then we're able to reclaim time lost to the deception of urgency and spend it in quadrant 2.
I work in a quadrant 1 environment. What do you do then?
Some professions are, by nature, almost completely in quadrant 1. For example, it's the job of firefighters, many doctors and nurses, police officers, news reporters, and editors to respond to the urgent and important. For these people, it's even more critical to capture quadrant 2 time for the simple reason that it builds their capacity to handle quadrant 1. Time spent in quadrant 2 increases our capacity to do.
It seems to me that everything in quadrant 1 demands my attention to be done right now. Is there anything that doesn't?
Some things are crises or problems in the making if we don't attend to them. We can choose to make these things urgent. In addition, what may be a quadrant 2 activity to an organization, such as long-term vision, planning, and relationship building, may be quadrant 1 to its top executive. This is his or her unique charge. The need for these things is great, and the consequences of either doing these things or not doing them are significant. The need for that executive is now. It's urgent, and it must be acted on. The value of the time matrix is that it helps us see how importance and urgency affect the choices we make about how we spend our time, and in the case of this program, underscore the need for planning. So why should we choose to plan? Results. Planning not only enhances our day-to-day effectiveness, but when done properly, actually increases your sense of control or sense of inner peace. You have more focus, more power, and you get more of the most important things done. Using planning tools most effectively is the next step. The purpose of a tool is to make a job easier, but have you ever used a screwdriver as a hammer? How about a dime as a screwdriver? Did they work? Well, sure. Kind of. But generally, tools work best when we use them the way they were designed to be used. The same is true for the tools we use for planning. Whether you use a paper planner, handheld organizer, a web-based system, desktop software, or some combination of these, they work best when we use them in a way that maximizes their effectiveness. Here are 4 keys to ensure that happens. First, determine the components of your planning system and decide which component will be the hub. You need to make that hub the central source for all tasks, appointments, commitments, and follow-up items. This includes, by the way, both business and personal. The more hubs you have running concurrently, the higher the likelihood that you're overbooked and under-prepared. Having just one primary source for all of your commitments will simplify your life considerably. Now, you might be wondering, what about other computerized systems at work, or coordinating with the boss's or assistant's calendar, or better yet, your kitchen calendar? I don't recommend that you discontinue using any of them. They are helpful tools. What I do recommend is that you understand that they're not tools for planning, but rather tools for communication. Simply check with those sources as frequently as necessary to ensure that the obligations you've recorded in your planning tool are as current as possible. Second, have a piece of your planning tool with you always. Now, I'm not talking 24/7 here, so don't get nervous, but almost. If you're like me, you're taking on commitments in all parts of your life continually. Having something in your hand to capture obligations, ideas, important notes, whenever they occur, is critical to becoming as effective as possible. So think of always as within reach and within reason, whenever and wherever you need to record information. A colleague of mine shared this story. She was on a plane, actually working on her planner, when the woman sitting beside her looked over and said, "Oh, you have one of those books." My husband got one of those planners earlier this year and carries it with him everywhere. At first I thought it was kind of silly, but not anymore. This is the first year I've actually gotten my birthday and anniversary presents on time. Third, eliminate floating information. Let's say floating information is anything you can't locate in 10 seconds or less. Before you panic again, that doesn't mean you have to have the information with you, just that you know its location. According to one study, we spend an average of 28 minutes a day just looking for stuff. That's nearly 200 minutes a week, more than 800 minutes a month, and a whopping 10,192 minutes a year. Yikes! Think about it. The only reason we ever hold on to scraps of information is to use them again. What use are they if we can't find them? Fourth, customize your planning system so it meets your needs. As you become a more experienced planner, look for ways to make your planning system more user-friendly. Ask yourself what's most comfortable, what's most convenient, and what's most effective. Bottom line, the measure of your planning system's effectiveness can be summarized in 3 terms: facilitate, balance, and fit. Does your planning tool and the way you use it facilitate the activities of your life? Are you significantly increasing balance in your life thanks to your planning tool? And is it a fit? Is your planning tool comfortable to use? A yes to all 3 questions is a big step toward planning success, which leads to our next topic, planning basics. As we get into planning basics, it will help to first define 2 key terms, tasks and appointments. You've probably spent a lifetime dealing with both, but have you ever thought about what makes them different? For our purposes, let's say that tasks are time flexible, whereas appointments are time specific. Now, I realize there's a world of gray between these 2 definitions, so let me be more specific. If I tell you I plan to exercise tomorrow, is that a task or an appointment according to our definition? Sounds pretty flexible to me, so I'd be better off entering it as a task. I'll fit it in when I can. If instead I told you I was planning to go for a run with a friend at 6, you've got it. It just became an appointment because it's now time-specific. You'll find that by keeping time-flexible events in your task list and time-specific events in your appointment schedule, you'll have a much easier time with the 4 planning basics: prioritize, track, capture, and retrieve. Let's start with prioritize. Prioritizing is truly a master skill. Let me tell you the story of Charles Schwab Sr. During the Depression years, Charles Schwab Sr. inherited a steel mill. Now, I think it's usually hard to feel sorry for people who inherit steel mills, but in this case, Charles Schwab Sr. had inherited a really bad deal. The steel mill was in financial disrepair and was going downhill fast. He really didn't know what to do with it, so he called upon a consultant named Ivy Lee and said, "Would you please help me? In fact, if you can share information with me in the next 20 minutes that'll help turn this thing around, I'll make it financially worth your while. But if you can't help me in 20 minutes, deal's off. I don't have more time." Well, Lee pulled a blank 3x5 note card out of his pocket, handed it to Schwab and said, "Write on this card the 6 most important tasks you have to do tomorrow." That took about 3 minutes. "Now," said Lee, "number them in order of their importance." 5 more minutes pass. "Now," said Lee, "put this card into your pocket and first thing tomorrow morning look at item 1 and start working on it. Pull the card out of your pocket every 15 minutes and look at item 1 until it's finished. Then tackle item 2 in the same way, then item 3. Do this until quitting time. Don't be concerned if you only finish 2 or 3, or even if you only finish 1 item. You'll be working on the important ones. The others can wait. If you can't finish them all by this method, well, you couldn't with another method either, and without some system, you'd probably not even decide which are most important. Spend the last 5 minutes of every working day making out a must list for the next day's tasks at Lee. After you've convinced yourself of the worth of this system, have your men try it. Try it out as long as you wish, and then send me a check for what you think it's worth. 2 weeks later, Ivy Lee received a letter in the mail from Charles Schwab Sr. thanking him for his advice. Attached was a check for $25,000. As I said, prioritizing is a master skill. Let's define it as giving value and order to the day's or week's tasks. When I say give value, I'm talking about ABC, or high, medium, low. You could even use color. Now, this is not a new idea. In fact, chances are you may already be doing something like this. As you skim your task list, assign an A, or high value, to all those tasks you consider vital. The dictionary defines vital as life-sustaining. Here's the test. A tasks are tasks that actually move you ahead. A tasks give you a high return on your investment. A tasks drive your business forward. And unlike B's and C's, A tasks lose significant value if they're not done today. B tasks are important. They need to be done, but they won't lose significant value if for some reason they're not done today. C tasks are optional. With a value in place, the next step is to put your tasks in order using a number. In other words, in what order will you do your A's, B's, and C's? Personally, I find this step really valuable. For example, if I have a morning full of errands, it makes sense to arrange them geographically. The same is true for ordering your tasks. Sometimes there's a logical sequence that will make the best use of your time. But I know people who never do this and seem to be just as productive. So, if you can assign both a letter and a number, I'd recommend you give it a try. However, if your planning tool only allows one, assigning a value, again ABC, high, medium, low, or color, is the most important. With your tasks prioritized, the next planning basic is to track them. In other words, monitor your progress. You should be able to look at your task list at any time during the day and see at a glance what's done, what's in process, what's planned forward, what's delegated, and what's deleted. Checking off completed tasks is a fairly universal practice, and it's just as easy to remove deleted items from your list. As for tasks that are in process, planned forward, or delegated, you may need to get a little more creative here. In my case, I like to put a dot or asterisk next to tasks that have been interrupted or stopped in process. That way, I'm reminded to get back to them and they don't fall through the cracks. If I can't get a task done on the day I plan it forward by moving it to another day's list or changing the due date. Then I put an arrow in front of the task on today's list to show that it's been moved forward. For delegated tasks, I like to see the name or initials of the person to whom I've delegated so I can more effectively follow up. So I usually make a little note in the margin if I'm using a paper-based planner, or add the person's name in parentheses if I'm using an electronic system. The last two planning basics are capture and retrieve, skills aimed at best handling incoming information. We capture two types of information, categorized and miscellaneous. Categorized information includes bigger picture items that belong to a group of related information. For example, if you get a memo on project XYZ, it belongs with the other materials in the XYZ file. If keeping files for everything doesn't work for you, there are other options available in most planning tools. Categorized information can be effectively captured in the appointment schedule, contacts list, or notes section of your planning tool. There are also lots of great database applications to capture highly categorized information for local and remote access. Miscellaneous information includes small, narrow picture items that don't seem to belong to any group. You can keep this information on a legal pad or inside your planning tool using a daily record, note, or memo. Since these entries are miscellaneous, it's a good idea to date and number them. That will make them easier to find. Speaking of finding things, I have a question for you. Have you ever written something down and then lost it? Or not remembered where you wrote it? Capturing information is only as important as your ability to retrieve it quickly and easily. 3 questions drive that retrieval process. What do I need? When do I need it? And where can I find it? Let's say I have an appointment in 2 weeks with Lynn to discuss the XYZ project. I need to bring the file. What do I need? The XYZ file. When do I need it? 2 weeks. Where can I find it? In my filing cabinet. So, I'd want to make an entry in my planning tool for 2 weeks from today, reminding me of the appointment, the need to bring the file, and where to find it. I might write, meeting with Lynn, XYZ, and then in parentheses, FC for filing cabinet. You can make up your own abbreviations, whatever makes sense to you. One more example. Let's say I need to call someone next week that I spoke with today about a miscellaneous issue. I have a miscellaneous note that I dated and numbered. What do I need? To call Steve about today's note. When do I need it? Next week. Where can I find it? In today's miscellaneous notes, number 5. I might write, call Steve, and then in parentheses, August 28th, note 5. Or just cut and paste the information to the new date. Prioritizing and tracking your tasks helps you stay focused on the things that matter most. Capturing and retrieving information using the 3 questions keeps vital information at your fingertips, freeing up time that used to be spent searching for things that have a far greater return on investment, like planning. As I mentioned earlier, for a plan to have any lasting impact, it really should be written down. Weekly planning allows you to identify and schedule up front the most important activities, giving you a bigger picture before the week gets too hectic. There are 5 steps for effective weekly planning. First, you want to review what matters most to you. We'll call this your values, roles, and mission. Think of it as a weekly opportunity to focus and refocus on the most important things in your life, personal and professional. People who skip this step often find themselves consumed by trivial things with no sense of purpose or direction. The second step is to evaluate last week. There are 2 things you want to look for in this evaluation. First, ask yourself, where did I succeed? Where did my planning really pay off? Then examine where you didn't do so well, where you were bullied perhaps into less important things, and why. I like to say, we can't get better until we know what better is. Evaluating last week brings strategies for improving into better focus. The third step is to check your master task list. Do you keep a big list of things to do? Not the daily or weekly list we talked about earlier, but another one of these days kind of list. That's what I'm talking about. Look at that list weekly and see if there's anything that can move from your master task list into your weekly schedule. Step 4 is to complete a weekly compass. It's a piece of paper about the size of a bookmark or an electronic equivalent designed to help guide you through each week. The idea is to help you achieve a better balance between your roles and the goals you want to achieve in each of these roles. Roles are your key relationships and responsibilities. Determining them helps you see that life is more than just a job or a particular ambition. It's a series of important relationships. Think about some of your roles for a moment. Examples might be friend, spouse, manager, family member, leader, coach, partner, and volunteer. Think about who you influence in those roles and how you influence them. There's room for up to 7 of these roles on your weekly compass. They're listed after one that's already filled in for you. Sharpen the saw. Some of you may recognize this as Habit 7 from Dr. Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The story goes like this. Suppose you were to come upon someone in the woods working feverishly to saw down a tree. "What are you doing?" you ask. "Can't you see?" comes the impatient reply. "I'm sawing down this tree." "You look exhausted," you exclaim. "How long have you been at it?" "Over 5 hours," he says, "and I'm beat. This is hard work." "Well, why don't you take a break for a few minutes and sharpen that saw?" you ask. "I'm sure it would go a lot faster." "I don't have time to sharpen the saw," the man says emphatically. "I'm too busy sawing." Sharpen the saw is our most important role because it makes everything else possible. If you're not taking care of yourself, how can you possibly take care of anyone else? This first personal role focuses on 4 essential human needs: physical, social-emotional, mental, and spiritual. You should ask yourself once a week what goals you want to accomplish in each of these areas. Next, fill in your other roles and ask, what is the most important thing I could do in each role this week that will have the greatest impact? Remember, our roles involve the people whose lives we touch. They involve the way we influence. They encompass how we respond and to whom we respond. So, is there a specific task, appointment, or area of focus that would have an impact? The last step in weekly planning is to schedule what Franklin Covey calls the big rocks. Imagine I give you a bucket and about 10 big rocks. Your job is to put the big rocks into the bucket. It looks doable until I pour hundreds of small pebbles into your bucket, nearly filling it. Being the good person you are, you try to get the big rocks in anyway, pushing the pebbles from side to side, but all to no avail. You just can't get all the big rocks into the bucket with the pebbles in the way. The trick, of course, is to put the big rocks in the bucket first. Then you can add the pebbles, and everything fits. Let's apply this to weekly planning. If we put our big rocks, the things that are most important personally and professionally, into our week first, there will be room to handle the smaller, less important things around them. If instead our initial focus goes to the less important, more trivial things, we'll continue to struggle with our big rocks. We put our big rocks into our week first by scheduling them as either tasks or appointments. So, pick a day to do your weekly planning, whatever day works best for you. You'll want to allow about 30 minutes in the same place every week, someplace quiet and free from distractions. And finally, make weekly planning a habit. It's guaranteed to produce choices and opportunities that will eventually ensure achieving what matters most to you. Staying focused on what matters most to you should be a daily goal, one that's more easily achieved through daily planning. I recommend that you sit down alone every day, away from interruptions, and go through a 4-step daily planning process. It shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes, which, by the way, is only 1% of your day. The first step in successful daily planning is to review yesterday. What did you do well? What were your most productive activities and events? If you could live yesterday over again, is there anything you'd do differently? Step 2 is to list today's tasks realistically. Start by reviewing your appointment schedule. How much of your day is likely to be spent in meetings? Do you need to build in time for any preparation? Only after you've reviewed the day's time-specific commitments can you really know how much flexible time is available. And only when you know how much flexible time is available will you know how many tasks and what kind of tasks you can realistically expect to accomplish. So, check your appointment schedule first and then move to your task list. The third step is to assign each task a letter or color based on its value. Let's review those. The tasks that rate an A, or most valuable, are those we consider vital or life-sustaining. By doing the A tasks, you literally sustain the life of your job or your family, or sustain your physical health. Tasks that may not be absolutely vital but are still important are Bs. Optional tasks get a C. The last step in daily planning is to create a task order. Look first at your A tasks. What order would make sense for doing them? The first of your A's would be marked A1, the second A2, and so on. Do the same with your B's and C's. As I mentioned earlier, there are lots of successful people who never bother with ordering their tasks, and there are many, like me, who do and love it. You'll decide what works best for you. With your daily plan in place, you're prepared to take on the day. You're also prepared to take on the challenge of acting with integrity in the moment of choice based on what matters most. We've covered what to do, but before we end this presentation, let me cover briefly what not to do. I want to be sure you're well equipped to avoid the top planning pitfalls. Number 1, What is most important to you flies right out the window if you allow an undertow of to-dos to rule your day rather than taking time to prioritize and act accordingly. Instead, stay focused on what matters most. Number 2, you fully display your colors as an inexperienced planner when you set an unrealistic number of things to do each day. Instead, follow the guidelines of daily planning and keep that list realistic. Number 3, you can find yourself stranded on the side of the road when you fail to customize your own planning system around one central tool. Figure out what works best and keep looking for ways to improve your system. Number 4, you're walking a tightrope without a net and have no way to capture information when you fail to have your planning system within reach at all times. Make having your planning system within reach a habit. Pitfall 5. You become swamped when you schedule your tasks and appointments with skill, but then forget to allow time between appointments. Remember again, you've got to be realistic. 6. You set yourself up for failure when you schedule without thought of the unexpected. Allow an hour and a half a day for the unexpected, except when returning from a vacation or business trip. In this case, allow 3 hours for the unexpected. 7. The cost in terms of time and energy is needlessly high by not having a quick and effective system for capturing and retrieving information. I've already outlined some ideas and encourage you to use them. 8. You're bombarded by floating bits of information when you fail to have one personal management system. Once again, consolidate, consolidate, consolidate. 9. You tend to bumble when you touch information more than once. In our case, act on it, delete it, or file it for later. Do it now. 10. You get tunnel vision when you fail to plan from a dual perspective. Weekly planning allows for the most important big rock items to fill your time first to ensure that they get accomplished. Daily planning allows for the small bits, everyday events and tasks to find their appropriate and most strategic spot in your plans. And finally, 11. You run yourself ragged by failing to allow time for advanced planning. Advanced planning gives you time and insight, so delegation, prevention, and preparation become habitual practices. The tactical basics of effective planning are not new. Most people will tell you they know generally what a plan is and how to do it, yet few plan in a way that profoundly impacts their productivity and ultimately their lives. Planning allows us to organize and execute around priorities, to shift from the urgent to the important. Planning on both a weekly and daily basis provides greater balance and context toward accomplishing what matters most. And planning is a proven strategy for increasing productivity and inner peace. Emerson said, "That which we persist in doing becomes easier for us to do. Not that the nature of the thing itself is changed, but that our power to do is increased." Through a dedicated implementation of the planning strategies I've discussed, planning will become easier to do. And in turn, your ability to do those things that matter most will increase. I wish you the greatest success. Thanks for listening.